The dust of Gila Bend, Arizona, clung to everything. A fine ochre powder that settled on the storefronts, the faded planks of the boardwalk, and the weary shoulders of its inhabitants. It was a town that had seen better days, and probably worse ones, a place where dreams came to wither under the relentless sun. The laughter started low, a snicker from the men clustered outside the saloon, and then it swelled, a boisterous wave of mockery that followed a lone figure through the main street. Martha Caldwell, a woman etched with the lines of hardship, pulled her worn shawl tighter around her shoulders. She was a widow, her husband, Thomas, a victim of a flash flood that had swept away their meager claim and their future. All she had left was a small leather pouch holding the last of their savings and an unyielding will to survive. The object of the town's amusement was a broken-down freight wagon, its wheels splintered, its canvas rotted, and its frame sagging like the skeleton of a forgotten beast. "Look at that, boys!" bellowed Jedediah, a man whose gut strained the buttons of his vest. "Martha's trying to buy a coffin on wheels." The laughter intensified, fueled by whiskey and the cruel monotony of their lives. Martha ignored them, her gaze fixed on the wagon. To them, it was junk. To her, it was a lifeline, a canvas for a new beginning. She approached Silas, the grizzled old prospector who owned it, his face a map of sun-scorched wrinkles. "Silas, I'll take it," she said, her voice steady despite the trembling in her hands. Silas scratched his beard. "Martha, it ain't worth the trouble. The wheels are shot, the axle's cracked. You'd be better off buying yourself a one-way ticket to California. I'll give you $30 for it." Silas's eyes widened. 30? That's more than it's worth. It's all I have left, Silas, please." He looked at her, seeing not a fool but a woman with an unbreakable spirit. He nodded slowly. "Done." The jeers of the crowd followed her as she walked back to her small shack on the edge of town, the deed to the wagon clutched in her hand. She heard them, but their words were as insubstantial as the dust they stirred up. She had a plan, a desperate, audacious plan born of necessity and a love she refused to let die. She spent the next few days working tirelessly. She couldn't afford new parts, so she scavenged. She found an abandoned mill and salvaged old planks, using a rusty saw and a hammer to cut and fit new wood for the wheels. She mended the canvas with patches of old burlap sacks, her fingers raw and bleeding. Her knuckles were calloused, her back ached with a constant fiery burn, but she worked from sunup to sundown. One afternoon, a tall figure on a fine bay horse rode up. It was Elias Vance, the most respected rancher in the territory. His face was a chiseled mask of quiet strength, his eyes the color of a stormy sky. He was known for his fairness and his no-nonsense approach to life. "Ma'am, I saw you out here," he said, his voice a low rumble. "Need a hand?" Martha, startled, wiped the sweat from her brow with a dirty sleeve. "No, thank you, Mr. Vance, I'm just fine." He dismounted, his gaze sweeping over her small, industrious operation. He saw the precision in her cuts, the strength in her swing, the determination that blazed in her eyes. "That's a big job for one person." "It's not as big as the alternative," she replied, a hint of steel in her tone. Elias Vance nodded slowly. He understood resilience. He had built his own ranch from nothing but hard work and a stubborn belief in the land. He didn't offer again, but he stayed for a moment, his presence a silent acknowledgement of her struggle. The town's scorn felt a little less heavy with him watching. A week later, the wagon stood transformed. It wasn't new, but it was sturdy. The patched canvas, though mismatched, was taut. The wheels, though crudely made, were sound. She had built a home on wheels, a mobile sanctuary, and it was then that she heard it, a faint, desperate sound that would change her life forever. The whimper was almost imperceptible, a ghost of a sound carried on the dry wind. Martha followed it to the gulch, a narrow ravine cut into the earth by centuries of erosion. There, huddled together in the shadow of a rock formation, were two small bodies, their fur matted with burrs and dust. They were orphaned coyote pups. their mother likely a victim of a hunter's trap or a predatory eagle. They were no bigger than her hand, their eyes still sealed shut, their whimpers growing fainter with each passing moment. They were dying. The town would have seen them as vermin, a nuisance to be dispatched without a second thought. But to Martha, they were a reflection of her own vulnerability, a mirror of her own struggle. She scooped them up, their tiny bodies barely a weight in her palm. She carried them back to her shack, her mind racing. She had no milk, no bottle, no way to feed them, but she had a wellspring of love and a fierce desire to protect them. She remembered her mother telling her about an old remedy for foundling animals, a slurry of flour and water, thinned with a little sugar. It was a long shot, but it was all she had. She nursed them painstakingly, feeding them drop by drop from a small improvised spoon. The first night, she held them against her chest, feeling the fragile beat of their hearts against her own. She named them Dust and Shadow, for the world they were born into and the fleeting hope she held for their future. Days turned into a week. The pups, against all odds, began to thrive. Their eyes opened, two pairs of dark, luminous beads that regarded her with a mixture of fear and trust. They followed her everywhere, their tiny legs wobbly as they navigated the floor of her shack. They were a secret, a quiet rebellion against the harsh realities of their world. One evening, Elias Vance returned. He was on his way back to his ranch and saw a wisp of smoke from her chimney. He dismounted, curious about the change he saw in her. The wagon was no longer a symbol of mockery. It was a testament to her tenacity. He knocked on her door, and she opened it, surprised. The pups, alerted by the sound, scurried behind her skirts, their whimpers a tiny, nervous chorus. Elias's eyes widened slightly as he peered past her. "What have you got there, ma'am?" he asked, his voice gentle. Martha hesitated. She couldn't lie, not to him. They're coyote pups. Their mother is gone." He said nothing for a long moment, his face unreadable. Martha braced herself for a lecture, for a warning about the dangers of keeping wild animals. Instead, he reached into his saddlebag and pulled out a leather flask. "Goat's milk," he said, extending it to her. "For the calves, but they can spare a little." Martha's eyes filled with tears. He had seen her need without her ever having to ask. It was an act of profound kindness in a world that had shown her little of it. She took the flask, her fingers brushing against his. A small spark, a nascent warmth, passed between them. It was a moment of connection, a silent understanding that transcended words. "Thank you, Mr. Vance," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "Call me Elias," he said, his gaze lingering on her face, "and take good care of them." With that, he tipped his hat and rode off, leaving Martha with a flask of milk and a heart that felt a little less heavy. News of Martha's wagon and her strange companions spread through Gila Bend, morphing into a new wave of ridicule. Now she wasn't just a fool, she was the crazy widow with the wild animals. The townspeople kept their distance, a mix of contempt and superstition in their eyes. But Martha didn't care. The pups were her family, her purpose. Dust and Shadow grew, their legs strengthening, their fur filling out into a soft, mottled grey. They were still wild, their instincts sharp, but they were also devoted to her. They'd lie at her feet while she worked on the wagon, their heads resting on their paws, a constant comforting presence. One day, as she was trying to hoist a heavy plank, Elias Vance rode up again. He dismounted without a word and took the other end of the wood, his strength making the task effortless. "You're going to hurt yourself, Martha," he said, his tone matter-of-fact. "I have to do this," she replied, her face flushed with effort. "I know," he said, "but you don't have to do it alone." He stayed for the rest of the day, helping her mend the last of the wagon's frame, his silence a comfortable presence. He was a man of few words, but his actions spoke volumes. He didn't ask her why she was fixing the wagon. He simply helped. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in fiery shades of orange and pink, Martha finally broke the silence. "Why are you helping me, Elias?" He looked at her, his eyes serious. "Because I respect what you're doing. You're not waiting for a handout. You're building something from nothing." He paused. "And because I like what I see, Martha, I see a woman with more grit than most of the men in this town." That night, they shared a simple meal of beans and cornbread by the light of a flickering lantern. The pups lay nearby, their ears twitching as they listened to the quiet rhythm of their conversation. They talked about their pasts, about the dreams they had lost and the new ones they were cautiously building. Elias spoke of his sprawling ranch, of the challenges of raising cattle in the unforgiving landscape. Martha spoke of her husband, Thomas, and the life they had hoped for. The next day, Elias returned with the proposition. "Martha, my ranch is a big place. I have a barn that needs mending, fences that need repairing. I can pay you a fair wage. You and your companions could have a place there. It's safer than here." Martha's heart pounded. It was an offer of a new life, a chance to escape the ridicule and the grinding poverty of Gila Bend. But it was also an act of faith. "Why me, Elias? There are plenty of men who could do that work." "Because I trust you, Martha, and I think you could do things out there that no one else can." He was offering her not just a job, but a sanctuary, a place where she could belong. She looked at him, at the quiet strength in his eyes, and a decision was made. "I'll come," she said. Life on the Vance Ranch was a world away from the dust and despair of Gila Bend. The ranch, sprawled across a vast, rolling landscape, was a testament to Elias's hard work and vision. It was a place of open skies and clear water, a refuge from the judgments of the town. Martha settled into a small, sturdy cabin near the main house. The wagon, now fully repaired, was her mobile workshop. Dust and Shadow, now nearly full-grown, roamed freely, their presence a quiet, wild grace on the ranch. They were her shadows, a constant reminder of the life she had salvaged. Martha proved to be an invaluable asset. Her knowledge of carpentry, born of necessity and her husband's teachings, was exceptional. She fixed the barn doors, shored up the fences, and even helped Elias design a new, more efficient feeding trough. She was a natural, her mind always a step ahead, her hands skilled and purposeful. As they worked, their relationship deepened. They shared meals, silent moments of companionship, and long conversations under the star-strewn desert sky. Elias found himself drawn to her strength, her quiet dignity, and the kindness she showed to the two wild animals she had adopted. He saw the world through her eyes, a world where even the most broken things had value and deserved a second chance. But not everyone on the ranch welcomed her. The foreman, a gruff, stocky man named Ben, was immediately suspicious. He saw her as an interloper, a woman who had somehow charmed his boss. He also saw her pets as a threat, a danger to the livestock. "Elias, those coyotes are trouble," Ben warned one morning. "They're going to go for the chickens, maybe even a calf. You should have her get rid of them." "They're not a threat, Ben," Elias replied, his voice firm. "They've been with her since they were pups. They know her. They won't harm a thing." "That's a big risk to take, Elias," Ben muttered, his eyes narrowing. The tension between Ben and Martha was palpable. He would watch her from a distance, a frown etched on his face, his skepticism a constant unspoken challenge. The drought arrived like a slow-burning fever. The grass turned from green to brown, the creeks dwindled to trickles, and the sun beat down with an unrelenting fury. The cattle grew thin, their ribs showing through their hide, their moans a constant sorrowful sound on the wind. The ranch, once a place of abundance, was teetering on the edge of a precipice. Elias was desperate. He had to find a new water source, a spring that hadn't yet been parched by the drought. The nearest known one was miles away, a treacherous journey through a narrow canyon. He called a meeting with his ranch hands. "We'll take a small herd," he explained. "Move them through the canyon to the spring. It's a risk, but it's our only chance." Ben, ever the pragmatist, argued against it. "The herd is too weak. We'll lose half of them on the way. We should just wait it out, Elias. Pray for rain." "We can't just wait, Ben." Elias's frustration was palpable. "We have to act. We're losing them. Every day we lose more." Martha, who had been quietly listening, spoke up. "Elias, I can help. I can ride ahead, scout the trail. My wagon is sturdy. I can carry supplies and water." Ben scoffed. "A woman and her pets. This is a serious undertaking, not a Sunday picnic." "She's a better scout than any of you," Elias said, his voice cold. "She knows the land. She's learned to read it, to listen to it." Elias had seen how she navigated the wilderness around her shack, how she had built the wagon, how she had raised the pups. He knew her resilience, her instincts. The trip was arduous. The canyon was a maze of jagged rocks and shifting sand. The heat was relentless. But Martha, with dust and shadow running ahead, navigated the terrain with an uncanny sense of direction. The pups, their wild instincts honed by their time in the desert, would sniff out hidden paths, warn them of shifting ground, and even find small puddles of water left over from a long-ago storm. One afternoon, a sudden rock slide blocked the path. The lead steer was trapped, its leg broken, its desperate lowing echoing off the canyon walls. Elias and the men tried to free it, but the rocks were too heavy, the angle too dangerous. "We have to put it down," Ben said, pulling out his rifle. "It's a mercy." But Martha saw something else. "No, we can move those rocks. We can free him." With Elias's help, she used the winch on her wagon, a contraption she had jury-rigged from spare parts, to pull the heaviest rocks away. It was slow, back-breaking work, but they did it. They freed the steer, and though its leg was broken, it was alive. Martha fashioned a crude splint from a broken wagon spoke and some leather straps, her hands gentle and sure. Ben watched, his face a mask of grudging admiration. He had scoffed at her wagon, at her animals. But she had done what none of them could. She had saved a life, and with it, a piece of Elias's dwindling hope. The herd, exhausted but safe, finally reached the spring. The water was a godsend, a cool, clear blessing that revitalized the cattle and the men. As they rested, Elias approached Martha. "You saved him," he said, his voice low with gratitude. "You saved the steer." "We saved him, Elias," she corrected. "And dust and shadow, they were the ones who found the way." He nodded, looking at the two coyotes who lay at her feet, their dark eyes watching him. "I was wrong about them, and about you. I owe you a lot, Martha." "You don't owe me anything. We're partners, remember." He smiled, a rare, genuine smile that lit up his eyes. It was a silent acknowledgement of the bond that had formed between them. The journey back was easier, the herd stronger, the men more optimistic. Ben, humbled by Martha's actions, kept his distance, but the contempt was gone, replaced by a quiet respect. Back at the ranch, the steer she had rescued began to heal. He was named Lucky by the hands, a living testament to Martha's compassion and ingenuity. Elias began to spend more time with her, not just for work, but for the sheer pleasure of her company. He found himself telling her things he had never told anyone else. His fears, his dreams, the loneliness that had been his constant companion since he started the ranch. She listened, her eyes warm and understanding, her own quiet pain a silent echo of his. They found solace in each other's company, two solitary souls finding an unexpected refuge. The peace was shattered by a new threat. A rival rancher, a ruthless man named Garrett, had been eyeing Elias's land for months. Garrett was a man who took what he wanted, and he wanted the Vance Ranch. He began by harassing Elias's hands, then escalated to a more direct attack. One night the ranch was hit by rustlers. They rode in under the cover of darkness, herding dozens of cattle away. The men were out on patrol, and Elias and Ben were left to defend the ranch house. The rustlers, a ragged, armed gang, were led by Garrett himself. Elias and Ben fought bravely, but they were outnumbered. A shot rang out and Ben fell, a bullet in his shoulder. Elias, seeing his friend go down, fought with a desperate fury, but he was overwhelmed. Garrett knocked him to the ground, his foot on Elias's chest. "This land is mine now, Vance," Garrett sneered. "You should have sold to me when you had the chance." Just as Garrett raised his fist to strike Elias, a blur of motion came from the darkness. It was dust and shadow. They were not attacking, but they were a distraction. They circled Garrett and his men, their growls low and menacing, their dark forms a terrifying presence in the flickering lantern light. The men, spooked by the wild animals, hesitated. It was all the time Martha needed. She emerged from the darkness, a rifle clutched in her hands, her face grim. She had seen the commotion from her cabin and had come to help. She fired a warning shot into the air. "Get off his land," she said, her voice a low, dangerous growl. "Now." Garrett laughed, a harsh, humorless sound. "A woman with a gun? What are you going to do, shoot us all?" "I won't miss," she replied, her aim steady. "And my friends here are getting hungry." The two coyotes, sensing her command, moved closer, their eyes gleaming. The rustlers, superstitious and unnerved by the wild animals and the fierce look on Martha's face, began to back away. Garrett, seeing his men falter, sneered one last time and retreated. He had won the battle, but lost the war. The aftermath was a scene of quiet chaos. Ben, his wound bandaged, was cursing his luck. Elias, bruised and battered, sat on the porch, his eyes on Martha. He had seen her 100 times as a capable woman, but this was different. She had faced down a gang of armed men and won. She was not just a survivor, she was a protector. "You saved us all, Martha," he said, his voice full of awe. "You and them." He nodded toward dust and shadow, who were now lying at her feet, their watchfulness replaced by a sleepy contentment. "We're a team," she said simply. Elias took her hand, his thumb tracing the calloused lines on her palm. "Martha, I can't imagine this place without you." She looked at him, her heart thrumming in her chest. The unspoken words hung in the air between them. It wasn't just gratitude. It was something deeper, something she had been afraid to feel. "I feel the same way," she whispered. He leaned in and kissed her, a gentle, hesitant kiss that was a promise of everything they had been searching for. It was a kiss of shared pain, of shared triumphs, and of a future they would build together. The news of Garrett's humiliating defeat spread quickly. The laughter that had followed Martha in Gila Bend was now replaced by whispers of a different kind, of respect, of a woman who had come from nothing and built a life, a woman who had tamed the wild and won the heart of the most respected man in the territory. Weeks turned into months. The ranch thrived. The herd recovered, the new spring providing an abundance of water. Martha, now an integral part of the ranch, was not just an employee but a partner. She and Elias worked side by side, their lives a seamless tapestry of hard work and quiet affection. The pups, now magnificent adults, were a constant presence, their wildness a part of the ranch's unique character. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Elias turned to her, his expression serious. "Martha," he began, his voice a little rough with emotion. "When I first saw you, I saw a woman with a broken wagon. And the town laughed, but I saw something more. I saw a woman with a vision, a woman with the strength to build something beautiful from the wreckage." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, worn leather pouch. It was the same one she had used to buy the broken wagon. He had found it in her cabin and kept it safe. "I want to build a life with you, Martha," he said, his gaze unwavering. "A life that isn't defined by what we've lost, but by what we can build together. Will you marry me?" Tears welled in her eyes. It was a simple question, but it was a culmination of everything they had been through. The laughter, the hardship, the fear, the rescues, the love. "Yes, Elias," she said, her voice a little shaky. "Yes." He slipped a simple silver ring onto her finger, a testament to a love that had grown from the dust and despair of a world that had tried to break them. The wedding was a simple affair at the ranch. The Hands, who had once been skeptical of her, were now her family. Ben, his arm still in a sling, gave her a respectful nod, a silent apology for his past doubts. The sun set. bathing the ranch in a golden light, a perfect end to a long, hard journey. Martha Caldwell, the ridiculed widow, was now Martha Vance, the rancher's wife. The broken wagon, the object of so much mockery, was now a symbol of her strength, her resilience, and the new life she had built. It stood in the corner of the barn, a silent monument to her past and a promise for her future. The town of Gila Bend still existed, its people still struggling with their own demons. But the laughter had stopped. They had seen what Martha had done, the life she had built. She had proved them all wrong, not with words, but with her actions. Years passed. Martha and Elias had 2 children, a boy and a girl, who grew up strong and confident on the ranch. They learned to ride, to work the land, and to respect the wildness of the desert. Dust and Shadow, old and grey, lived out their lives as honored members of the family, a living reminder of the kindness that had started it all. The story of the widow who bought a broken wagon became a legend in the territory, a tale passed down from generation to generation. It was a story not of magic or of impossible events, but of the simple, extraordinary power of human resilience. It was a story of a woman who was laughed at, who was scorned, and who, with nothing but a broken wagon and 2 orphaned animals, built a life so rich and so full of love that it left everyone speechless. It was a testament to the idea that true worth is not in what you possess, but in what you can create from what is broken, and that sometimes the greatest treasures are found in the most unexpected places.